G'day, g'day, welcome or welcome back. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at quite a few things. Chalmers and his response to his inflation issues, the Liberal Party and Andrew Hastie stepping down from a potential leadership spill, One Nation and their rise once again with even more new polling coming out, One Nation and their very progressive movie, which has been seeing one of the songs from the movie hitting #1 in the charts, and an interesting statistic that just came out about forced marriages. We'll get into all that and more on the Mark Perrotta Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blaster! Welcome to the Mark Perrotta Show.
We're going to start off with the song that came out from Holly Vance as part of a super progressive movie, which is a movie that was released by Pauline Hanson. It's a very edgy, very satirical, but not really satirical movie. It's basically taking every single portion of the left-wing ideology to its extremes, putting it in front of you and showing you what it looks like to basically the average Australian. Watch this song. It's very edgy, so I suggest you do not show it in front of your kids if you're watching this. So either skip or remove your kids. Watch.
Mwah. You will respect my pronouns. Not all ladies have ovaries, some have a penis. They say that I'm a he, that I'm a she, 'cause I gotta be another D. And I don't care what people say, I'll never be a him or them a her. 'Cause I'm a real biological woman, a real biological woman. 'Cause you know I'm not, I'm the original thought. I was born this way, it's in my DNA. I'm a real biological woman.
My baby has no gender. I hope it's a bender. Don't joke when you woke. Joke.
My guilt is embedded in my genes. Got flags in my biotech and me. Shapes on from the river to the sea. No doubt that I'll be LGBT.
Q plus, you bigot.
'Cause I'm a real diabolical lefty, a real diabolical lefty. Ideology, between hate and you. I'll intimidate, I'll indoctrinate. I'm a real diabolical lefty, a real diabolical lefty. Check your bias if you don't hesitate. We identify as M's and V. More rotations than a Wendy WB. Obese body positivity. I'm cancel culture, rich sigma vulture. You can only be made if you can menstruate. I'm so far left that you look far right. If you're pale, stale, and male, get out of my sight. Got 2 dads on every TV ad. No one wants a hetero 'cause of contraband. Welcome to country, it's not your land. It's your wife's boyfriend. All this privilege is yanking on the chain, while common sense is going down the drain. Doing hard time for my hate speech. You can shovel your opinions and beliefs. 'Cause I'm a real pathological snowflake, real pathological snowflake. Trying to run me like a reader multiply. So stand aside, 'cause we're the DEI. I'm a real pathological snowflake. Trigger alert, trigger alert, trigger alert. A real biological woman, a real diabolical lefty, a real pathological snowflake, a real biological woman.
Well, that's one way to get attention, that's for sure. Crazy thing about this is that this song actually made it to #1 on Apple Music and then was instantly banned from Apple Music, which means it dropped back down the charts. I believe it's now been reinstated. But this song speaks to many of the things that people on the right wing, and not even the right wing, the centre, the libertarian, the people who are just regular folk, have been saying for a really long time. It's basically this, that the normal part of what is now to be on the left wing of politics is all of the things that were stated in this video. People who take offense to this song have to realize that this is what they sound like to the majority of people in this world. When they try and tell us that a man can be a woman or a woman can be a man, when they try to shame us for just seeing biological reality or for simply being who we are, which is something that they, for some reason, cannot accept within themselves, that we are in the wrong. And this is how they act. They try to virtue signal continuously, and then they act like snowflakes and children when they are corrected, resorting to insults and slurs as a consequence of the fact that they have nothing actually intelligent to bring to the table. Now, this song is part of a much larger movie that Pauline Hanson has put out, which is now showing in several cinemas around the country. From all reports, people have been flocking to go and watch it. And from all accounts, it's edgy, but it's also funny. It's something that can't be said for what the ABC put out the other day. And it is really interesting. Generally, when a show gets put together, you'll see clips from it. But the ABC's show that we showed on the episode on Wednesday had only one clip come out. And funnily enough, it's the exact clip that I said was the only funny portion of the entire show, which was the portion where they listed Auntie Donna, and Auntie Donna came on, but it was actually the comedy group Auntie Donna. And it just so happens that ensuring that an entire show is run by a single subset of people, which is only Indigenous people within a certain show, does not correlate to creating a good show. Like all things, when you create DEI policies, as a general rule of thumb, you do not get the quality that is required because you are forcing an identity onto the person rather than a quality aspect to who you are picking to host your show. And not just hosting your show, it's in every respect. It's the same thing that people started to speak about when Charlie died. That one clip that came up where he said he'd have to question if a black pilot was qualified. The reason behind that sort of statement is that when you create a subset of people that you can pick from, it's like trying to pick in rural Australia, for example. If you're trying to find an IT specialist in rural Australia to come and do your IT work, it's very difficult because the people that you can select from are limited. And so if you limit your quality pool, you're going to end up with less qualified people being able to do the job that you are looking to get done. What is intriguing is the response that I have seen from the clips, and I watched Dr. Joanna Howe's response with her husband earlier today, is that people are really enjoying it for the laughs. They're actually laughing at the content because it's disparaging on both fronts, because it does disparage the average white man as well within the clips, because it just shows how ridiculous so many of these allies are. The way that they prostrate themselves before these ideologies instead of prostrating themselves in front of God, as they probably should. They find these things to fill in the gaps of what should be taken up by an ideology which is universal rather than a man-made crazy thought process which disparages truth and turns reality into whatever you dream up on an average Tuesday at the pub with your mates. There is no more truth on the left wing of politics. It's all just pandering, saying something that sounds edgy, labeling people in some way in order to call them something that they clearly are not, but pocket-holing them, and in that way you can rule them out as someone who needs to be listened to or someone who ought to be inside of polite society, because you can label them in whatever term you decide, racist, bigot, whatever it is, and as such, you are no longer listening to their opinion. It is this cycle of people who live within their own bubble. And the premise of the movie is that quite literally, it is set that the progressive people live within a bubble, which is covered by a rainbow, at least from Joanna Howe's description. And that's exactly what it is. People do not engage on an intellectual level on the left anymore, which is why they are just progressively getting dumber and dumber and dumber. And this next generation is just getting worse and worse and worse. They get all of their education from TikTok. They never read anything outside of what is listed on some sort of social media platform. They have never read a book in their lives, and they think their worst enemy in the world is a billionaire. The way that we have cycled into madness in this world, this isn't just Australia, in this world, is a direct consequence of the fact that we have such prosperity and we have no understanding of what it is to suffer. In no way, shape, or form have any of these people truly suffered in their lives. And then they pretend as though they can virtue signal to the rest of us who have an understanding of what it is to just live day by day and do the hard yards. Most of the people don't even have children. They don't have a stake in the future of the country. They're sitting here pretending as though they are allies to a community that they are harming. And at the end of the day, all they are doing is making the rest of society suffer for their insanity. It'll be interesting to see how this movie is taken by the majority of Australia. If it actually does hit some sort of streaming platform in the future, and I'm sure it will, because it wouldn't have been cheap to launch this. So I'm sure the cinema pitch is a way to regain the financing that went into this movie. But at some point, it would become a political move for Pauline to just simply put this out on some sort of streaming service. And when that does happen, it is going to be hectic to watch the replies that come out from it. Unfortunately, making these sorts of little please do's is kind of essential. I enjoy doing it just for the fun of it, but at the same time, if you want to get a message out, you need the people in your community to just comment, like, subscribe, all of the normal jargon, right? Please just take a moment and give me a hand. We need to create a culture of commentary together. And I love the messages coming in my DMs. Put it in the comments section so that everyone else can see it too. Thank you. While we're talking about crazy lefties and their wild ideology, everyone remembers Zohran Mamdani, the new Muslim New York mayor who is running the state. He was elected effectively on the promise that everything was going to be free and cheap, and he was going to make things really, really beautiful in New York City again. That the state would be a safe haven for illegal immigrants, that basically everyone could live the way they want to live. It was all cotton candy and rainbows during the election speeches. And then the day after he was inaugurated, he came begging you for money. And now there's no more free stuff. In fact, bus fares, which were meant to be free, about 3 weeks after he was inaugurated, became more expensive. There were clips that were coming out of people jumping into the bus and refusing to pay, saying that Zohran said it would be free. And now we've got this clip. Effectively, Zohran saying that New York City is in so much debt that it is worse than the global financial crisis. Watch.
About a fiscal crisis at the scale greater than the Great Recession. And so there will not be one single thing that can answer that crisis. It will require us to pursue every single avenue. That means looking inward into savings and efficiencies. That also means raising taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers and the most profitable corporations. And it means recalibrating the relationship with the state. What
does recalibrating the relationship with the state mean? Recalibrating the relationship with the state, in essence, means you're actually going to get less now. What does taxing the wealthiest New Yorkers mean? It means that the wealthiest New Yorkers are likely to leave New York. What does you having to tighten your belt mean? It means that you now have to become poorer in order to maintain a lifestyle that is peaceful in that state. It is effectively the exact roadmap of what it is to live within a communist regime. You will own nothing and you will be happy. You will be equal, but you will be equally poor. And the people who we intend on ensuring the general prosperity of everyone will leave for greener pastures. Because at the end of the day, the people who pay the most taxes within any sort of system that has a socialist element to it are the wealthiest people. We often hear this even here in this country. Everyone losing their minds, and to circle back to Pauline Hanson again, over the relationship between Pauline Hanson and Gina Rinehart. Now, Gina Rinehart being the wealthiest woman in Australia, why is that a problem? Gina Rinehart and her companies pay the equivalent of 60,000 plus average taxpayers' taxes every single year. We don't have too many billionaires in Australia. In fact, we don't have enough. We need far more. We need more people who have the gall, the balls, and the ability to create companies that can make billions of dollars. And they don't do it off the back of the average Australian. These companies that make billions of dollars, as a general rule of thumb, garner their wealth from trade between themselves and other nations and other populations. China isn't selling its goods to its own people. It sells it to Americans and Australians and Europeans. That's how they have so much wealth. Because while they make cheap products off the back of slave labor, they then are able to sell it off to other countries and make a pretty penny. And that's all money that comes in. I've tried to explain this before, but the way that a nation creates wealth for its citizens is not by taxing its own citizens more. It's by increasing the wealth pool. If your household has an income, let's just make it easy and say $1,000. If I give my wife $100, the household still has $1,000. If I give that $100 to a cousin or a brother, then I only have $900. But if I am able to get $100 from my brother, $100 from my cousin, we now have $1,200. That's like us partnering with Canada or the UK and getting money from them as an exchange of goods. It's the things that we do in this country, the things that we make in this country, that then allow us to garner more wealth from other people in other nations. It's the average trade of a normal business operation. The problem is that to engage in these sorts of things that countries want, you need a lot of money. Your average person is not going to be able to build a coal mine that China and India and Russia and all of these other countries will want to buy. We aren't talking about your small business that makes handmade crafts and sells them on Shopify. We're talking about the sort of companies that engage in bilateral trade between different nations. That is extracting wealth from the land through large-scale digging, through large-scale creation, or even intellectual property. That is to say that what we need in Australia is more people like Elon Musk, more people like Bill Gates, more Warren Buffetts, people who create stuff that entice other nations to invest in our country. That is how we are going to get to a point where we don't land in the same dump heap that New York is currently in. New York is in the position that it is currently in for one simple reason. It has been pandering to the left wing of politics for far too long, pretending as though you can continually allow people to come into your, in this case, state, support them, and while supporting them, also make it livable for the rest of the citizenry within your state. Australia is in the exact same boat. The reason that the right wing of politics is against immigration has less to do with the kind of people that are coming in and more to do with the fact that we do not have the money or the infrastructure prepared for the amount of people that we are bringing in. And this is another point that we've brought up before. When you invest in families today, that investment is an 18-year investment. That means you can slowly build in the infrastructure over the course of the lifetime of a family. So if you are having two people come together into a single household, they make 2 or 3 kids each, maybe more. And in that time, over the 18 years, you're building houses, new hospitals, new suburbs. But when you are constantly importing people into the country, not only do they not have a support network here, and so they rely on the state as their support network, but they also have pre-existing needs that are not met throughout the course of the 18 years that they are here. They have to establish themselves straight away. That means that the infrastructure has to be here, ready for them. That means the schools, the hospitals, the houses, everything has to be ready for when they drop dead, just get here. That's the problem with having high migration into a nation rather than high birth rates, or at least manageable birth rates. Australia's birth rate right now sits at 1.4. We need to be at least 2.1 in order to grow our nation. That's replacement rate is 2.1. We should theoretically be at about 2.4, 2.5 kids per person in order to maintain a natural growth in the nation. Considering the space that we have, we can easily get that to 3, 3.5. And over the course of the next 50 to 60 years, we would see an economic boom the likes of which Australia has never seen before. And in saying all of that, you can understand why the average Australian today is stepping so far away from the Liberal Party and the Nationals and stepping towards one nation. Because the Liberals and the Nationals have done the dirty deed. They've made the deal with the devil, and they've decided after the last election that the way they want to win in politics is by pandering to the left wing, instead of solidifying their position on the right and making policies that are good for the average Australian. They dug their own grave. So what's happened to the Liberal Party over the course of the last 4 days? Because it feels as though for the last 5 years, we've heard almost nothing interesting coming out of anything Australian politics. And now all of a sudden, Australian politics is all the rage. Australian politicians are being reposted by senators in America. David Littleproud's speech about guns was reposted on X by Ted Cruz, who I think is the governor of Texas in America. Australian politics is on the rise because there are things that are happening here that mirror what is happening globally. But the Liberal Party and the Nationals have come to a definitive impasse. The leadership spill that will take place on Monday, or at least the attempt, will be coming singularly, more than likely, from Angus Taylor. Now, there was a push by Andrew Hastie initially, but after internal cabinet talks, he does not have the support to take over the leadership. That likely has a lot to do with the fact that he voted for the bill that caused all of this to happen in the first place. But the polling has been insane. I don't think there's ever been a collapse like this in political history of an institution like the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party has dropped from state to federal, between 16 and 23 points. That is an insane number. Now, most of that has gone directly to One Nation. Some independents, some shifted back to Labor, but Labor isn't looking too good either. Let's take a quick look at some of the recent federal polling done by Demos and put together by 6 News, who is a pretty good organization. Now, 6 News is run by a bunch of really young guys and girls, and the way that they run it is they are all left-leaning, from my estimation at least, but left-leaning in the right way. Left-leaning in the way that is not offensive. It's left-leaning in that they like the idea of being more charitable towards the average citizen rather than being pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Let's take a look at this polling. So this is projection. It's projection polling based upon the polling that was done by Demos AU. If you just look at the pure numbers here. So the Liberal National Party have dropped an insane amount. That's 15 seats. So this is the pure seat count. One Nation likely to take 32 seats in the next election. The ALP losing 16, and that's only going to keep dropping. At this point, the Liberals have already dug their grave. They have to stick in on the left-wing politics. And so it's very likely that as Labor continues to fail, as we saw with Jim Chalmers' horrendous interviews over the course of the last week trying to justify the inflation numbers, it's very likely that several of these seats might slip back into the LNP. There are still a lot of seats that are very swing, and it's early days, right? We've got 20 odd months left until the next election. It's a lot of time. A lot of stuff can happen. You just don't know what could end up coming out of this. But look at the map. A lot of rural, Adelaide and South Australia are just gone completely to One Nation. New South Wales and Queensland mostly going to One Nation. This map speaks volumes to the way that Australian politics is currently heading. It is shifting right because people are afraid of what is happening in this country. And you can see that simply based off the fear response that is coming from the female vote. Now, we spoke about this on Wednesday. Let's take a look at the actual polling. So this is the polling that you can see for women. Women have shifted to One Nation by 7 points. That is since the last election. with 9% still undecided. And undecided generally will either mean minor party or independent. Men have only shifted to One Nation by 2 points. And it is funny because most of the time you hear that One Nation is just a white man's party. It's white, straight men who are voting for One Nation because they're bigots and they're misogynistic and they hate everyone, they're xenophobic, they hate everyone who's not a white, straight male. But it's the women who are shifting. It's the women who are leading the charge because they're unsafe. They can feel it. The country is no longer the country where you could just go outside for a walk, just enjoy yourself and not fear potentially being dragged into the bush and taken at any time. We just heard like 3 or 4 cases over the course of the last 2 weeks of random bashings. There was a woman who was raped up in Queensland just this week, bashed and left to die. She somehow managed to find her way back to a house where she called 000 and survived. There is a general lack of safety in this country that is a consequence of a lack of assimilation from migrants to a large extent. There is also a large extent of that which is disenfranchised men. Don't get me wrong. For the longest time, we've been told in this country that if you're a straight white man, you're a dirtbag. And so as a consequence of that, you are going to get people who fall into that category and say, you want to call me that? Let me lean into that then. So yes, there are also the NSN crew who are disenfranchised by the world and pretend as though militarizing themselves is the best way to ensure that they are still seen as something to be looked at in this country. But where are the real problems coming from? And we can find it pretty simply from this next clip, which indicates that forced marriages in Australia in the last financial year were up 30%. Watch.
Children forced into marriage in Australia soared by almost 30% in the last financial year, according to federal police. School communities are being urged to play a role in curbing the crime.
Marriage needs consent, and you can't give it if you are underage or don't have the mental capacity to understand the concept of a marriage ceremony.
A forced marriage is different to an arranged marriage, where both parties enter the relationship with full knowledge and consent.
In 2023, there were 91 cases. In 2024, 118 were reported.
The AFP says because the crime sometimes involves family members, young victims may be reluctant to report it. School communities can help by looking for warning signs. They include
students being constantly monitored by family, students who express concerns about family travel overseas, or a sudden drop in effort or performance in schoolwork. If you or someone you know has experienced a forced marriage, call 131 AFP or 000 if there's immediate danger.
Now, in the same amount of time as forced marriages have gone up 30%, we've also just happened to have a 30% rise in the Muslim population in this country. A forced child marriage is something that is almost inherently an Islamic thing, and some Hindu as well. You get it in India as well. But as a general rule of thumb, when you think about who does forced child marriages, it's Muslim countries. So is it a coincidence that in the same amount of time as we've seen a 30% rise in Islam in this country, we've also seen a 30% rise in forced child marriages? It is no wonder that people do not feel safe anymore. It is no wonder that the average Aussie is shifting to One Nation, which for a long time has been thought to be a radical element of the right wing of politics. But as it turns out, if you continue shifting the Overton window to the left, you are going to end up with policies that make people poorer, that make people unsafe, and that make people need to dissent from your ideology in order to maintain their way of life. And that's where we're at today. I would say that what we are seeing today is only going to continue over the course of the next 18 months. If anything, it's probably going to get worse. Now, before we close out today's episode, there's been zero news on the bombing in Perth. The only thing that we've heard is that it has been raised officially to an investigation for a potential act of terrorism. We've heard almost nothing from the shootings that happened in the central west of New South Wales. There was one clip that came out where somehow the bloke who did this was at a police station on the 22nd and somehow was not apprehended. They released some tattoos as if that was going to make it easier to catch him. There's been another murder-suicide over in Western Australia. Crime is soaring. We have a lot of problems. There are 2 elections that are coming up that are going to really tell the story of where Australia is heading. South Australia heads to the polls, I believe, in March. Now, the polling out of South Australia seems to indicate that One Nation will pick up several seats in the state. They're polling at something like 24%, with Labor, I think, at about 35, 36%. The Liberals are basically off the map at this point, sitting at about 10%. But at the end of the year, we have the Victorian elections. Now, the Liberal Party over there is doing a little bit stronger. The Liberal Party over there is doing quite well, all things considered. Labor is shot in the foot. I mean, Jacinta Allen is effectively dead in the water at this point with the policies that she's pursued and the way that the budget down in Victoria has been handled, the fires have been handled. Effectively, there's nothing that she can run on except that a tunnel got finalised that was started like 7 or 8 years ago and was over budget by like 50, 60%. So it's not exactly a win that you can, call home about. The next 6 months is going to be very telling for the country. I think that we all have to assume that things will likely get worse before they get better. But at the same time, I don't think it's so dire that we need to get ourselves too rattled up about it. But if you have something to say, make sure that you continue to say it. Thank you so much for the people who drop comments down in the comment section below and who like everything, especially to the people who consistently comment on all of my videos. I definitely appreciate it and I love talking with you guys. And if there are people who want to have a conversation about this stuff that disagree, please jump on. Do it in the comments if you want to. Shoot me private messages. I reach out to other people quite frequently. I almost never hear back. And if I do hear back, it's basically like an FU from the other side of politics. I had one just today. That was just like you're a misogynist man because you don't believe in abortion. Sorry, I don't believe in murdering 40 million women a year in the womb. I'm a misogynist. But I'm being a bit sassy. But in essence, what I'm trying to get to is this. Let's continue having the conversation because the conversations that we are having are making a difference. People are listening, people are hearing, and there are some really awesome voices out there who are getting a lot of traction and making the average person feel like they've got a voice. And that is important for this next step in Australian politics. We have been very, very disengaged from our political class for a very long time. It's effectively, we get around to an election, the day of, we remember that there might be a free sausage at the polling booth. We go, we have a look at the card of the person that we've voted for our entire lives. We've got no idea what they've actually said that they're going to do for us. And we just get in there. We have to change that. Have conversations with the people around you. Don't be worried about losing friends over this because at the end of the day, if they were really your friends, you wouldn't lose friends over having a disagreement on certain policies. That'll do us. That'll do us for the show today. My name is Mark Perrotta, and this is the Mark Perrotta Show. God bless.